Hello, I'm Eric Snodgrass, and thank you for watching this Thursday night, May 18th in-depth ag forecast brought to you by Nutrien Ag Solutions. Satellite imagery today is really showing where that smoke from the Western Canada wildfires has been pushed. It's all over the Pacific Northwest. It's getting pulled into the backside of this low that's moving toward the Great Lakes, and it's even out ahead of it. And it's been spent probably the most time over the last couple of weeks in parts of New England. They're getting a little bit of a break from it now. We can see the scattered storms. Let's kind of get this moving here. Let's take you back and then play it forward. A lot of scattered convection in the southeast. Some of these storms putting down some really heavy rain. We are watching a coastal low right here, where over the next couple days, this is going to ride out of parts of Florida and Georgia up the Carolina coast. One of the main features of this forecast is just a lot of scattered convection inside of this area. And it's going to be aided by this front that over the next 24 hours is going to continue to sag farther and farther to the south, giving us a rise tomorrow of severe weather kind of right in through this corridor, right in through here. We'll talk about that more in a few seconds. More scattered convection coming for much of the mountains here, but this weekend a trough will sweep into parts of Washington and British Columbia, knocking the temperatures back after what has been a very hot week and what will be a hot weekend, and start to deliver the first chances for rain to British Columbia and Alberta. Very critical rains given the wildfire smoke here. So let's go from there and look at our all hazards weather map this afternoon on Thursday. You can see that there's several different areas and different parts of states that have the air quality alert. And it's important to know that this is a National Weather Service office call. They get to say whether or not they're going to put it out there. So that's why you have very hard state lines delineating where the air quality issues are. But we know that behind this, a big area of high pressure is coming in, and I'm concerned about the risk of a frost event here in parts of western North Dakota. And we just need to keep an eye on what those temperatures are going to do. So I want to show you that by going to our high-res models first. Now, what we're going to look at here, let's blow this up so you can see it. This is the high-res NAM. I show it to you all the time, but this is it forecasting the temperature field. And I've overlaid on it very small wind vectors so I can kind of keep an eye on the winds. So as we play through this afternoon and this evening, it's great. This model's high enough resolution to capture convection. So do you see all the discoloration in through here where these cooler spots are showing up? This is all due to thunderstorm development. And so this is the model responding to the cooling air and the downdrafts of these thunderstorms. Now, we're going to watch those storms and then get into the overnight hours. And what I'm going to be watching for tomorrow morning is the lack of strong winds under this high pressure cell. I'm going to be watching for how clear the skies get, how much smoke is sitting over the top of it as well. And then try to assess how long we might spend touching a freezing temperature. Because at 4 a.m., maybe this is about an hour and a half before the sun rises, we've got, or maybe 2 hours, we've got no frost yet in the model. But as we go through 5 a.m. towards 6 and 7, right as the sun begins to rise, we might get down here and touch, 32, 31 degrees. So this will be parts of this section of South Dakota and this section of North Dakota. We need to keep an eye out on that. Now going forward through the day tomorrow, what we're going to see is storms are going to pop again in the evening on that frontal boundary, but be aided by some flow that's coming out of Mexico. So keep an eye right here. This is where the models are attempting to pop the storms. See them right there? And that's going to be the front as it continues to clear south. And by the time we get into Saturday, it now pushes it along with its rain toward the northeast. And we have a cooler weekend here under this big high pressure cell in the midsection of the country. Now helping fuel those storms, is this little shortwave right here. Getting into Friday, that's going to match up with the frontal boundary sitting in this part of Texas, going over toward Arkansas and Oklahoma, and that's going to be our target area for the severe weather. But north of it, we've just got flow coming in like this. That's dry, that's convergent, that produces high pressure at the surface, and it's colder. We still have the ridge in the west, and that's what's going to keep the west hot this weekend and also promote more of the fires that's going on in parts of British Columbia and Alberta. But there is change coming to that area. So let's kind of get into that. First, the severe weather threat. This would be for Friday. Again, we're keeping a close eye on this particular region as the front sags down and interacts with that upper level shortwave. What it looks like on the high-res NAM again, now this is showing you precip, is if we play through this evening, we can see the scattered storms here along the frontal boundary. It's going to sag over Iowa and in the morning hit Wisconsin, Michigan, Illinois, Missouri. While that is moving through the midsection of the country, the coastal low I mentioned here has slid out of Georgia and is going to spread rain overnight into early tomorrow morning into parts of North and South Carolina. And the little shortwave, the one I showed you coming up here, is going to hit that front and ride it. It's going to ride it in this direction and that means we're going to get better rains coming out of this in Oklahoma. Now, as we play through the morning, the front sags over one of the drier places in the country still. I'm talking about Kansas into Missouri. In the last 2 weeks where we've had all these storms, that's been an area that's been missed. By Friday afternoon and evening, that's when we're going to keep an eye right in through here on the storms to pop as this front starts to clear its way off to the northeast. The coastal low rides up over Delaware into New Jersey, and behind this a big area of high pressure, and that's how our weekend is really going to start off. Now, I think it's critical just to see how much moisture gets in right in through here, because we go back and look over the last 30 days and just start trying to identify these spots that have been drier. You know, parts of Nebraska, Kansas, Missouri, there's a lot of area in through here that despite heavy rains all around it have been missed. There are pockets throughout Illinois, Wisconsin, Michigan, getting into the eastern Corn Belt that are drier too, and a few just dry pockets that you stretched across the south and southeast as well. When you put this all together and just stare at the image though, we start to identify those places that have been really seen a lot of heavy rain. And it's important for us to assess this map and at the same time look at the latest soil moisture values. So this goes down to 16 inches. And again, that's the area that I'm hoping tomorrow's rains can hit. Now, thinking about this, there are drier places like right in through here, and then New England has been very dry overall. So the weekend rains will be welcomed in this area. But I'd like to make a comment about this map. You know, I live right here in this area. We've had heavy dew every morning on this crop in my backyard. And in addition to that, I've seen a lot of tile drain right here in this part of Illinois draining right now. So maybe this map is a little misleading here. I'd like to hear from some people in Indiana and Ohio and Michigan as well as Pennsylvania just to hear what the situation is like in those areas. But what this leads me to is just looking at the latest drought monitor, which was released today. And we can still see those same areas struggling with drought that we have been seeing. But there's some important things about this map that we're going to talk about at the end of this video. We're going to get there in just a few seconds. The first part of it is this is what's changed in the last week. So remember, these change maps, we look for the improvements or the degradation. And certainly there's been a lot of area into the midsection of the country that, thanks to last week's storms, has continued to see improvements. And we've also had storms, this week as well. But looking at all of spring together, what I want to show you is where we rank in the last 131 years from March 1st to May 18th, looking at precipitation. So what we're identifying here is those areas that for the remainder of spring need to continue to see moisture improving in these pockets in order to ensure that we can get forward into the heart of the growing season without the major moisture stresses or the lack of soil moisture. So question is, can the near-term pattern continue to help these areas? And the short answer to that is, let me take you back here, not really. The reason why is because for the most part through this weekend, the flow comes up over the west and then dives behind this trough. And there's a lot of northwest flow, which remember in spring is convergent in the upper levels of the atmosphere, produces a big area of high pressure. That just pushes the front faster, doesn't give it a lot of time to produce a lot of precipitation. That's out ahead of this low. But playing through the weekend, one major thing I'm going to be watching for is on Sunday. On Sunday afternoon, if this trough right here doesn't look like much, but if it does show up, this is critical for one, knocking the temperatures back down, which over the weekend could get deep into the 90s like in the Columbia Basin here. But this will bring in a short wave that will start to initiate better chances for precip in British Columbia and Alberta. And after that, the flow just kind of goes, to be honest, a bit weak. Now, normally, if I saw this at the end of May, where the jet stream was making a little dip over California and then running out like this from the northwest, that's a signal that we would start to see above average precipitation in the plains, the mid-south, the Midwest, extending toward the Great Lakes and eventually east. But to make that happen, you need to have a big ridge right here, and then everybody gets stormed on. We don't have that right now. In fact, there's a jet stream trough here, and the flow has to come out and kind of split around it. It's almost diffluent in this area. And what that means is very weak jet stream flow in this region really kind of reduces our chances of having large systematic, low pressure systems that deliver rainfall. And we just play this on out there, and I don't see through the end of May a whole lot of change in that overall. So we need to distill what that means by looking at a series of maps kind of highlighting what the next week or 2 weeks of precipitation looks like. So here we go. The WPC, this is their forecast for the next 7 days. Again, pieces of this. Monday, Tuesday, shortwave, rain in Western Canada. Storms nearly every day along the mountains here, but we're still watching more moisture coming in to parts of Texas, New Mexico, Colorado, where it's been very wet, parts of Kansas and Oklahoma. The Midwest, all the way back to the northern plains, is going to be drier after that front slides through. We're drier here because that coastal low just stays too far out to shore, but scattered convection over the southeast, and much of what you got right here is coming from the first system this weekend and the second one late next week. Let's compare this to the European model. This is the 12Z run from today. And again, overall, I can't make much more of a story out of what I just told you from the WPC. We can also compare this to the latest 7-day forecast from the GFS. So European and GFS. And I like to compare the two. And about the only main area of difference is that the GFS is wetter in through this area. And they're both pretty similar on the dryness in here. But the European model is wetter in pockets in the southern plains. And you can kind of identify a lot of different areas, and it's good to do that. But overall, those are the areas I think I'm just going to kind of try to stay focused on. Now, after we get out past the next, 7 or 8 days, week 2, let's just get it out there, starts off something like this. So just in general, this flow coming like this. And the models are going to be trying to stay consistent with this pattern and put wetter conditions here, but drier to the east of it. Cooler, but drier. And that's why the week 2 forecast, if you look at all three of them here, there's the CPC's forecast. This is the European model's forecast, and that's the GFS. Could we see wetter conditions in this area? Sure, but I don't want to be overly ambitious and think that these are drought busting in these areas. There's moisture coming in because the flow is doing that. But man, I don't want a trough here. I want a ridge there in order to really open this all up and bring rain for everybody. So that's going to be the limiting factor. Now, what are the temperatures going to do in response to all of this? Well, let's start you here. This is that 5-day sliding window I love to show you. And as we just play this out, let's pause it right here. This would be the 23rd to the 28th. A lot of cooler air still lingering down here. Remember that's where that trough is sitting. And then as we play it forward, we're going to finish May and even the first couple of days of June, just continue to see overall weak temperature gradients across the country. And a weak temperature gradient across the country results in weak jet stream level flow, which means a lot of isolated storms rather than big storm systems. Now, how I can tell you that there's a weak temperature gradient is because normally it's hot south and gets cooler as you go north. But now you notice that it's warmer than normal to the north and cooler than normal to the south. So we've weakened the gradient. All right. Tomorrow morning, we'll talk about the newest frost risk. But in this video, I want to start to stretch this out and really get into the longer range. A quick note on South America. Not having much rain in this area of Brazil this time of year is normal. Okay, but the dryness you see in Mato Grosso do Sul, toward Paraná, even Sao Paulo, parts of Santa Catarina, and Rio Grande do Sul, this is going to have a negative impact on the safrinha crop here. It's going to limit the top end. But finally, wetter conditions coming into Argentina. This has been consistently in the forecast for a while. This precip starts here in the next couple of days, or gets going in the next couple of days, and delivers rain to places that were deep in drought. So let's just make a quick transition and start to blow this out and look at some longer range things. First of all, I'm going to take you to one of my favorite weather websites, which is WeatherBell. And the first thing I want to pull up for you here is I want to show you the new European weeklies. So here they are. Let's get the newest ones, the 30-day outlook, and let's play this out here. And once again, we've seen the models show up drier in this area. Now, I think the reason for the dryness is we know that the European model has an initialization bias. In other words, it's starting off dry there, and it just doesn't want to break away from that when you look at a 30-day stretch of time. But we need to compare this to something like the CFS V2. And the CFS V2, remember this morning we saw it was wetter. Now we may be seeing a little bit of a drier bias here for the first week of June, and the second week of June drier as well. But I'm going to tell you something. The only reason why I think the models are doing this is simply because they just got an initialization that was so much drier. The overarching factors that are controlling this June time period don't point to just dry conditions in here. It actually points to wetter conditions in this area with more storms. I think it's going to be much more stormy than the models are leading on to. So I have to tell you that right now, these two long-range model runs for June just don't add up in my head as showing such a strong dry bias in this area. just my assessment. And part of that comes from the fact that we still see the ocean temperature patterns doing what we've kind of said they were going to do all along. El Nino developing quickly, PDO, the negative PDO signal, fading. In fact, let me show you this. Just in the last week, look at how much warmer the ocean temperatures have become. That's a 1 week temperature change, already much warmer in this area. So with the PDO fading, what this just tends to do to the forecast is reduce the risk of longer duration drought episodes in the midsection of the country. And that's aided by the development of El Nino, which would say the same thing. I'm going to add a third factor to this. The waters throughout this part of the Atlantic are very, very warm. In fact, if you want to compare them to last year at this time, this was a year ago. Now, of course, we had a full-blown La Nina. We had cold water, big negative PDO signal. But I want you to look over here, because this year, compared to last year, much, much warmer ocean temperatures. So the reason why I'm telling you this is because you just saw a forecast that says, oh, this whole area is going to be drier than normal going forward. And I'm saying, well, the PDO is fading, the El Nino is developing. We're going to start to get a sense of flow coming like this, which in June starts to kick off storms. And you look down here and see all this moisture that'll be there from the heat being, released into the atmosphere full of water. And it's just going to set this thing up. The wild card with all of this is, where's the Bermuda High going to be? And if the Bermuda High, develops and sits here, then it could really pump the moisture in. If it takes a little different shape, let's say instead it looks something a bit more like this, that's a drier signal for the southeast, but not necessarily a drier signal for the Midwestern United States. So I'm just telling you that I know we saw the forecasts, but I don't fully buy into the level of dryness that they're talking about here. And just so you're aware, this is about an inch deficit in June. That would be what that would be for Iowa. Okay. Last thing we want to do is this. Newest data just came out today from the CPC. And this is their forecast. Let's go back to that one. And this is their new seasonal outlook for drought. Now, if you look down here at the color bar, they've now put a large area under drought improvement or removal, where over the last several months, this was the area that they had marked down for drought persisting and even getting worse. So we've now seen changes in that. I think the CPC is seeing the same thing that I just discussed with you. If we then slide up and show you their new outlooks, this is their new 1 month outlook. Notice that it is not dry as the models were in the month of June compared to the ECMWF or the CFSV2. They've got above normal precip here in the plains. That is a telltale sign that El Nino has a grip on this pattern and that the negative PDO doesn't. Okay. And then finally, we just need to step this out and look at their new 3 month outlook. And this is their new June, July, August forecast. And this is about as El Nino as you can get it, all right? Above average precipitation for a big section of the eastern part of the country. Weaker southwest monsoon, which would normally start in late June but go into July and August. And if we do, in fact, get some split flow here coming around the west, then this would just set up things right here to produce a lot of storms. And that's a very El Nino-like look at this pattern. Now, I realize that this follows my narrative, the one I've been giving you for quite some time. And we always have to be careful with this, right? I am just as susceptible to confirmation bias and conflating ideas as anybody else is. But I would just say this. I wasn't surprised by their forecast being released like this. What is very interesting, though, is if you come to this site and click on this button here, 3 month, what you're going to be taken to is their official forecast page. And if you go out there, we've already seen June, July, August. You've seen the temperature. But what about July, August, September? Their forecast, again, keeps that same corridor wet with drier in the northwest and a weak southwest monsoon. You then say, well, what about another 3 months out of that? What about August, September, October? And it just appears that there's not going to be any trouble with the Bermuda High getting this flow to come out of the Gulf of Mexico. Now, remember, this is the heart of hurricane season. So we have to be paying attention to this, even though there's an El Nino, that these waters are very warm. But right now, the model just keeps CPC, the European model, National Multi-Model Ensemble, and even the statistical approaches to this are still showing this as a forecast. So I'm going to give it just a point here, all right? When we look at these precipitation anomalies for summer, there it is, that's June, July, August. I want it to be very clear that summer thunderstorm patterns are driven by storms, right? Summer precipitation patterns are driven by storms. And as a result, there will be time periods where there's heat and there's dryness and flash drought. That'll happen. None of that is capable of being captured at this point by any long-range forecast or model. But what this is telling us is that the possible dominance of El Nino this summer is a real possibility, and it is certainly growing faster than I think some models had forecast. So this is just going to continue to be the important piece to watch going forward, the competition between El Nino and the cooler water off the West Coast and how the Atlantic responds. So we'll just keep you updated, all right? Appreciate your attention. We'll talk again soon. Thanks.